The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everybody. I want to say congratulations. Thanks for making it to the webinar today. I think a lot of people maybe are home, and if you're on the East Coast and snowed in or iced in or whatever, our thoughts are with you, and I hope that I hope you stay safe. So let's get started. If you we're recording this as usual, so that if you have other people that you want to see it or people that have missed it will be able to see it that way as well. So today what we're going to talk about is eClinical technologies. And this is a really important area because it's a key part of risk-based monitoring. It allows you to have much more visibility into what's going on at the site, some of the tools, and this is probably the first of two that we'll do on clinical technologies. And it also is to help you understand how your monitor's role, how technology can affect what you do. Just a quick reminder that we at Mauna RBM have been doing risk-based monitoring and remote trial management for over 10 years, again, working on how to develop both the technologies and the processes for that. And we have implemented this on multiple trials, and we are really interested in expanding the number of people that use risk-based monitoring. We think it's the best way to go, and so that's the reason that we're here, is to really give you practical advice about adopting risk-based monitoring. It's to really start you on your path so that you can explore more areas than you might have gotten in traditional training programs, so that we could build a cadre of trained monitors and enhance trial quality. As I mentioned on all of them, our videos are available on our YouTube channel, Mauna Risk-Based Monitoring. And if you would follow us on Google+, which is Mauna RBM on Google+, then you'll get notified every time we post new materials. You'll get a notification. So if you follow us there, then you're going to get the latest on new training videos, white papers, all of those kinds of things that can help you in your journey to adopt risk-based monitoring and enhance the way you're doing your clinical trial oversight. As we mentioned before, the first thing is the goal of the entire program is to help you understand risk-based monitoring principles, goals, and how to achieve those. Now, for today, what we want you to be able to do is to describe technology requirements that are needed to review and manage data and documents in electronic systems, to understand the key requirements of 21 CFR Part 11. And as I've mentioned previously, this is a regulation. This is not a guidance. So these are things that you have to do from a legal standpoint. We want you to understand the importance of role-based access and technology systems in protecting PHI, or personal health information. We want you to be able to convert a paper document to a certified electronic source, and how an electronic investigator site file can assist you in your remote monitoring. So that's the goal for today, and let's get going and learn some stuff. So one of the things I wanted to go over with you were kind of the huge number of technology kind of options there are, and they each have their strengths and weaknesses. They each, even within a type of system, whether it's electronic data capture, which most of you will be familiar with, electronic source is a little bit different. So these are all data capture tools. Electronic source is where you collect the data contemporaneously with your visit with the research subject. So the idea would be the first place that you enter that data, and there's lots of different kinds of electronic source. If you're in a hospital and you're seeing patients, for instance, on an oncology trial, the electronic health record could be considered the eSource. But for us, the reason we really like the use of electronic source is because It allows you to see that data immediately, be able to respond to it and review it. E-diaries, many of the efficacy endpoints are now, and safety endpoints are collecting data directly from subjects through both diaries and then specific patient-reported outcome measurements, whether it's a HAM-D or whatever. Also, you'll hear IWR, which is interactive web response systems, IVR, which is interactive voice response systems, and sometimes you'll hear IRT, which is I think stands for interactive response tool, but I'm not sure of what that abbreviation, but you'll hear all of those. You also have integrated safety and clinical databases and the EHR. So those are all data captured approaches. Some of the document management tools, and again, I think what I hear when I'm hearing about risk-based monitoring is a lot of it is really on only looking at data. And what I want to emphasize as part of this training is that documents are as important as the data. So that's why we recommend an electronic trial master file so that you can manage those documents electronically, but also an electronic investigator site file, which can allow you to review signed informed consents, source data such as from an SAE, as well as all the regulatory documents. So the benefit of that is it allows you to know what documents you have with something like an EISF, to review documents remotely, to get away from Xeroxing a 1 foot high stack of whatever's in the site's reg binder and then having somebody have to reconcile that. So for us, I think these are really important tools, and probably one that you have not used as much is the electronic investigator site file. And I really think this is an important tool. Now, how about some other tools? So there's portals, and again, this is a way for you sometimes for the sites to interact and access information. Also, eConsent is another one, and this is becoming more and more valuable. There's some guidance or questions and answers around eConsent that just came out, I think, last year from the FDA. There's CTMS systems, which are clinical trial management systems, and these often include more higher level information, whether it's site information. It often can include monitoring, e-monitoring reports. It can have timelines and things like that. So that's another tool that is out there and sometimes used. Clinical data warehouse and data repositories. These, I think, are really important because it allows you to bring data in from multiple different sources and use that to better review, more comprehensively, more integrated approach to review what's going on at the study. So we really like data repositories with reporting tools associated with them. So JReview is one that many people know because it's been used for medical monitoring for a long time. The FDA uses it. There's new tools that are also available. Spotfire is one. ClickView is another. Excel, don't forget Excel. Excel works too. Each of these has good things and bad things. And so what we want to do, what we spend time with is really helping people to understand, which is the best tool, and then helping them get that implemented. So as I said, when you think about these reporting tools, they don't work in isolation. So I hear oftentimes people saying, oh, this Spotfire is a great tool. The visualizations are beautiful. But remember, there's a lot of back-end work that has to be done to make sure the data fits so that these beautiful reports and data visualizations work. So you can't just pop data from a trial into these and expect to get what you want. But when they are set up properly, they are a tremendous asset, and we depend on them for pretty much every aspect of the oversight that we do. Not all, but most of the things. So as I mentioned, why should you as a monitor or clinical person care? So when I was, before I got involved in the technology space, before I got involved in risk-based monitoring, I was one of those people that said, oh, that's somebody else's job. I don't really care about it. Just get me the data. what I've come to realize is that it is really important because each system does different things. Even within EDC, some systems can, or Esource, some systems can do cross-visit edit checks so that you can compare data across two or three or four visits or however many. Others can't. And the reason you as a monitor need to know that is because you have to know what the system is going to check so that you know what you need to check that the system isn't doing. So one of the things that we often recommend is that monitors actually play a role in what's called user acceptance testing so that you truly do know what the system does, because it helps you support the sites as well. So if you know how the system works, if you've actually entered subjects in there, then you are going to be a much stronger asset and help to the sites when they're having challenges about how do I do something, because you'll understand the system better. And then finally, technology is guided by specific regulatory requirements, and you are responsible for assuring certain of those requirements are met. So training is a big one. Usually the training up front is not a problem because everybody gets trained at the beginning. The problem is when you start to have site turnover, when you have maybe new versions of software or new forms or whatever. Documenting this training is a key part. We'll talk about it more. Also, the role-based access. All of these things are really important for you as a monitor, and we haven't really, as an industry, things like the data capture tool has been primarily sitting within data management. And so we as an industry, as a part of that industry, may not have spent enough time really understanding how they work. So the first thing is, what is 21 CFR Part 11 anyway? I had one person tell me once, oh, it's just about e-signatures. It's not important. It's really important, okay? And it's important that you know what it is and you know what it does. And it provides specific requirements for electronic signatures, how to generate certified copies, how to do what the audit trail is and what it needs to have for that, and data access control. So again, when I talk about this, I'm talking about what's called role-based access, or it could be called privileges, either way, whichever way you want to think about it. But it's really important to remember it includes both system requirements and associated processes. So that's really important. Is you can't have just a system. It has to be a system plus processes to meet the requirements for 21 CFR Part 11. So when does it apply? And so it applies to anyone who, when they're, and this is out of 21 CFR Part 11, anyone who, in fulfillment of a requirement in a statute or another part of FDA regulations to maintain records or submit information to the FDA, has chosen to maintain those records in an electronic format. So if you maintain your records in electronic format, 21 CFR Part 11 applies to you. If you are doing everything in paper, then it doesn't. Although today we don't do that. And today, almost every trial has a component of electronic, an electronic component as part of the trial. So let's go first to our first poll. And what the question here is, if a vendor states that their system is 21 CFR Part 11 compliant, is that true? I mean, assuming that when they say it that they've met these parts of the thing. So can you say that when a vendor says a system is 21 CFR Part 11 compliant, is that true? So go ahead, answer the poll. We'll give it a few more minutes so that you can ponder that a little bit. And it is a bit of a trick question, so I'll give you a little bit of a hint there. Okay, it looks like we've got pretty much everybody here, so take a minute. Any last minute stragglers? Okay, I'm going to close the poll. And here are the results. So the answer is 85% said it was false, and 15% said it was true. And the answer is false, okay? And the reason is let's just go to this so you can see it. It's not possible for any vendor to offer a turnkey Part 11 compliant system because it requires both procedural controls or processes, including training, notification, SOPs, as well as administrative controls to be put in place by the user in addition to the technical controls that are covered by the vendor. So the answer when they say, oh, our system is 21 CFR Part 11 compliant, you'll go, not so much, okay? So what can they offer? They can offer an application or software system that contains the required technical elements of a compliant system, but you still have to put on top of that or layer on top of that the processes and documentation as well. So now where does it apply? As I mentioned before, whenever electronic records are used in place of paper in a regulatory submission, when activities, regulated activities, which fall under what they call the predicate rule. So anything that you're going to submit to the FDA, if it's maintained both electronically and in paper, then 21 CFR Part 11 applies. But when you're, and whenever you have records that are submitted to the FDA in electronic format, then you have to think about 21 CFR Part 11. Also, if you're going to use electronic signatures to be the equivalent of handwritten signatures, so any EDC system would be that way, but you could also, as I'll show you, it could be also important for using e-signatures in electronic trial master files as well. So when an electronic system governs any part of the GXP process, so that would be good manufacturing process practices, GLP, good laboratory practices, good clinical practices, all of those are required, are covered under 21 CFR Part 11. And remember, the reason for this is to focus on data integrity so that when the data come out of the system, you can trust them, and that you can read them, that you can go back to them, that you can create your trial. All of these are part of the reason that we have 21 CFR Part 11. And we won't go through all of it. It's really long. We do have a whole training session on 21 CFR Part 11 too on our Mauna RBM YouTube channel. But let's go into the ones that are absolutely critical for you guys. So the first is e-signatures. So we've got another poll to keep you guys awake. And I'm being kind of tricky on these. So here it is. If I log in using my username and password, does that meet the requirements for an electronic signature? So we'll do this one ahead, kind of before we go into the requirements. So we'll just kind of see where you guys are. So, ooh, you're speedy here. So we're almost there. Okay, let's close the poll and we'll share the results. So most of you got that right, knowing that I was tricky in my polling. If I use my username and password, does that meet the requirements for e-signature? And the answer to that is no. 88% of you got it right. And so now let's look at what else you need, because we just said that wasn't enough. So part of the e-signature requires that you indicate an intent and meaning of the e-signature. You'll often hear me talk about an attestation. What am I saying? I'm certifying. So you'll see in your in the EDC systems, it'll say I've reviewed the documents and the data for this subject and confirmed that it is correct. That would be an example of I certify blah blah blah, and then you sign it. Also, you have to both enter the system with a username and password, and then also do a username and password when you're executing the e-signature. So oftentimes I'll have PIs will say, why do I have to do it twice? Because one is for getting into the system and the other is specific to that e-signature. And there are some small things that if within a certain login session that you're going to use your eSignature multiple times, sometimes you only then have to add one, either your username or password, probably your username. But those are kind of fine tuning things that you don't really need to get into right now. But just so that you know, on a basic thing, you want to have that attestation language. And when I evaluate systems for eSignature, I make sure that I can customize that language, because I may have the eSignature mean one thing on one form and something else on another form. And the other thing is, depending on what I'm doing, but if I'm looking at things like my investigator site file, I want to make sure multiple people can use the eSignature and it's not just for the PI. So those are some things to think about. But the eSignature is a hugely valuable tool. And as I said, as part of 21 CFR Part 11, when you do your e-signature and when it comes out associated with that document, it needs to show the printed name of the signer, the date and time the signature was executed, and that attestation language or the meaning of the associated signature. And those need to be linked with that document. So if you download that document and print that document, you can see that information on there. So that's a check that you want to be able to do, because that's all tied with part of the 21 CFR Part 11 requirements. So remember, you need to have two distinct identification components, and in most situations, that's a username and password. You can use other things, but those are the usual ones you'll see. They are subject to the same controls as electronic records, okay, meaning that who can access them, what they can do. They need to be included as part of a human readable form in the electronic records. As I said, when you print it out, you need to be able to read that, which you, again, as you're checking what to do with an e-signature, and it needs to be attached to that specific record, that electronic record. And when you print it, that e-signature shows. The other piece that many people don't know about, but is in 21 CFR Part 11, is that if you've never used e-signatures before, then you need to notify the FDA of your intent as a company to use e-signatures. And this is the letter, this is in the 21 CFR Part 11, but it says this is to certify whatever that company is intends to, that all electronic signatures executed by employees, agents, representative, wherever, are legally binding equivalent of traditional handwritten signatures. So this is something that you should submit from your company. Every company should have that that's using e-signatures, which is pretty much every company. Sorry, we're jumping this, go forward. Just to, I wanted to go through this with you because it's confusing to many people. So you'll hear a term digital signature and another term electronic signature. Now, a digital signature is an electronic signature, but an electronic signature is not a digital signature. So it is a electronic signature, but it has additional kind of cryptographic methods for confirming the identity. So there are certain companies that will give you a little tool that you can use, and you can use that to confirm who you are. Sometimes it could be something like a fingerprint. It could be any number of different things. So this is a kind of higher level signature, but the electronic signature is basically a computer data compilation of any symbol executed, adopted, or authorized by an individual to be their legally binding equivalent of an individual's handwritten signature. Now, in most cases, and I can't think of any right now where you do not have to have a digital signature. There could be certain things that may be within a company, but from a regulatory standpoint, electronic signatures are sufficient. So I don't know of any place where you have to use a digital signature. And these are much easier. E-signatures are much easier to do than digital signatures. Now, the second piece that we want to go through as part of 21 CFR that is really important is role-based access. And I expect most of you have been involved in this. You may not have known what it was called or why you were doing it. But what role-based access is, it's the assigning of a user to a specific work group or role. according to the responsibilities for a project. And their privileges within the software system will be related to their specific role, maybe what sites they're assigned to, whatever. So the idea here is that you get access to what you need to do, but you don't get extra access. And usually what you'll see, and most of you have probably put them together for an EDC system at least, is you have the subject's name, I mean not the subject, the user's name, their email, you may have the affiliation, and then what role they have. And then from that role, that will define what they're able to do within the electronic system. And since we use multiple electronic systems, oftentimes the person will have a different role depending on the system. Now, let's go to EDC first. So the most common things that you'll see are, read only. So you can see the data, but you can't do anything to it, because usually the only people that can do anything to the data are the site personnel or the subject. So entering data is something that traditionally is not done by the sponsor. It's not done by the CRO. It's not done by the monitor. Now, and that's in a traditional EDC system or electronic data capture. Again, modifying the data, it can only be done by somebody who has the ability to enter the data. And as part of 21 CFR, which we'll go through in a minute, you also, when you modify the data, you have to give a reason for why you modified the data. Another role, which is what you guys are used to, is issuing queries. So that's another part of role-based access. Even what subjects you can see or what sites you can see is another component of role-based access. So if you are a monitor and you're monitoring sites 10 to 20, you won't see anybody else's data. You're only going to see sites 10 to 20. And that's, again, around protection of access to data and making the controls as tight as they need to be. Closing queries. Oh, I'm sorry. My computer's jumpy today. Closing queries, again, that's something that usually monitors and data managers doing. Signing CRFs or specific pages of CRFs. So you might, if you use your EDC to collect data on SAEs, you might see an eSignature both on the whole CRF and then one on any serious adverse events. And this one within EDC systems is usually only for the PI to sign. So again, all of these are roles. And all of this is done as part of the setup. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to keep talking about electronic investigator site files because I think it's such an important part of remote trial management. And there, where you're going to see the role-based access is who can view either documents and folders. So part of the regulations around the regulatory binder that a site has is that they need to have access and control of that, which means that they can see all the documents in their electronic investigator site file. They can download documents, they can upload documents. So it's so that definition of which folders and files an individual can see is part of how you would use role-based access in the electronic investigator site file. And the reason for that is that allows you to set this up to protect subjects' personal health information. So, and also to store other confidential information. So you can set up a specific folder that's only visible to the site personnel and the monitor, but the sponsor doesn't even know that folder's there. And that allows you, and you can also give access then to any auditor that needs to see it. So this allows you to maintain that control and be able to protect that information as you need to do that. Also, many of these systems have the opportunity that you can either download or view. So if you are reviewing it as a monitor, PHI, information with PHI, you may not want that monitor to be able to download. You may only want them to be able to view it so that you don't have documents out there on people's laptops that you don't need. So this is something that you want to look for as well. the ability to upload documents, to delete documents. So you obviously don't want a lot of people be able to do this. So this is all part of your role-based access. And as I mentioned, electronically signed documents to generate certified electronic copies. And we'll go through that a little bit more, how to do that. So those are the kinds of role-based access that you want to have within your system so that you can control and maintain confidentiality. So some of the other things that are part of, again, 21 CFR, and these are where the monitor's responsibilities are really important, is that you must provide adequate and appropriate training. And that usually means system training. So how does that piece of software work, whether it's your EDC or your EISF? You need to have an explanation and documentation that when they use their electronic signature, it's the equivalent of a paper or wet ink signature. Your training should also include both system training and study-specific training, and that would be for EDC, Esource, whatever electronic systems that you're using. And then you need to document that training and store that in if you use a TMF, we, of course, will use eTMFs and eISFs, but remember, all of that needs to be documented, and that's part of the requirements. So where, as I said, up front, not usually a problem, everybody gets trained, but what is important is if you have a change in staff, you want to make sure that that staff get trained, and things like access to electronic systems is corrected. So if a staff member leaves, you need to make sure that whoever's maintaining those user roles and access to the electronic system knows, so that they remove access. And then if you have new staff coming on, you want to make sure that they've been trained, you have documentation of their training, and that they then can get their usernames and passwords as well. So let's look, as I mentioned to you, I'm not going through all of 21 CFR Part 11. First of all, we wouldn't have enough time. And second of all, it's not something that you absolutely have to do. So I'm really focusing on the things that you need to do. And so one of those is so one of the things that they have in there are around operational checks and controls. So what does that mean, and how do you use that? So for instance, the way that you see those controls is that if you have to do, let's just say you're doing randomization is done in an IWRS system, and the study subject should not be randomized until all randomization criteria have been checked as having been met. So what you would do as part of the design of your systems is to make sure that all those are answered before you allow the randomization code to be given, or the kit number to be assigned. So that's how you would work on using operational controls to make sure certain things are we're maintaining certain high-risk areas. So clearly you don't want somebody, and that goes back to our risk we talked about, you don't want somebody being randomized who doesn't meet the inclusion and exclusion criteria. So by putting some of these in the electronic systems, you can help make sure that those controls are there. Another example would be from an ePro, where the subject must enter a username and password so that they can enter data into their ePro, and that once they've signed that ePro, or it could be the same way with a CRF, once the investigator signs it, nobody else can do anything to that unless the signature is removed. So most of you may have run into that around your EDC systems, but the idea there is when somebody attests that their information is correct and this is the information, then you can't go back in and change it without that person removing the signature so that you can update the data. So those are the kinds of operational controls. That's part of going back to what we talked about risk, and the kinds of things that you often want to build into your systems so that you're able to more carefully control your high-risk areas. Now, the audit trail is another area, and what we find is the audit trail is there. It's a requirement of 21 CFR Part 11. But many times, monitors haven't ever been taught how they can use that. and where to find it or how you can use it. So what an audit trail is it's a computer generated, security relevant, basically a record of everything that's been done within that system. So date and time of any data entries, any other actions, for instance, raising a query, if you approve a form, any of those things should be maintained in the audit trail. And that allows you, and again, if you go back to our initial session that we had on training, and we talked about being able to see what changes occurred, who made the changes, why they happened. This is where you find that information in an electronic system. And that's why we prefer electronic systems, because you have that documentation there to know who did what. And that's the other reason that we like eSource, because then you're finding the person who actually saw that subject rather than the person that's transcribing the data. I'm sorry. So some of the things you need to know is that changes can't obscure previous entries. And with electronic systems, that's great. They do that. But if you've ever monitored and you see when somebody scratches something out so much you can't see what they wrote, you know from, when I did good documentation practices back when I was, even before I went to med school. So that was a key thing, even in the hospital records. You only line through it, date and initial any changes if you're doing it in paper. In electronic systems, that's capturing those changes, and then nothing gets removed. They must be readily available and in human readable format. And you should have the ability to search, sort, or trend copies sent to the agency if they want to be able to review it. And it should be maintained as long as the electronic records. So I pulled one out of a EDC system just so that you could see what I meant. So if you look at this, they're all different, but so you can see birth date. So the old value, remember, was 10 July 2014, and the new value was 10 July 1990. So you can see here, so that this was just on the demographics form, that on July 23rd, 2015, and it says exactly when it is, that this person changed these data fields. And the reason they changed them is updated information. So this allows you to go in and see who did what, when, and allows you then to go back in. Now, how and why would you use that? So, for instance, if you were using eSource, where the expectation is that the site sees the subject and enters the data at the same time, if the subject visit is on, let's just say, July 21st, and but the data are entered on July 22nd, then you know that data was not entered contemporaneously, and that means there's probably a piece of paper sitting around that you need to worry about, and it means that you have not followed the study procedures. So that's one way you would use an audit trail for things like eSource. Now, another way that an audit trail can be used is if someone let's just say a monitor says they've reviewed all the subjects in the EDC, but the audit trail doesn't capture that they looked at certain subjects, then that's another way an audit trail can be used. So it can be used to help signal the misuse of a system or evidence of complete review. So the other thing is, if you are using this, one of the things that we like is that it helps us, when we're using it from an eSource standpoint, to know if the issue is maybe not at an entire site, but only at one person at the site. So it allows us to have much more granularity and understanding about what's going in at the site, so that if we find that most of the queries are on Susie's data entry and not on Jane's, then that's how we are able to better focus on what we need to do for our training as well. So the audit trail is your friend, and it can really give you a lot of information to help you to manage your trial. Now, the next piece I want to go to is the trial master file. So if you don't know, a large group of people put together what they call, and they're still working, I believe, in this area, on what they call a DIA reference model. So this is a recommended structure for the organization of your TMF. And I put in the handouts a copy that I actually removed the lock. So it comes locked, but I removed the lock so you can access this TMF DIA reference model. And this is the most current one. There's still some ambiguity about where certain documents can be filed, so it's a good idea to keep either a study specific reference of where documents should be held, or to what we do is use an electronic, we use a essential document checklist where for each site we define what documents are in there. And so that way, if at any point you can go in and look at what's in each folder and see what documents are there and where they're filed. So this piece as a corporate organization to be able to set up some standards around what needs to be filed where is a good activity. And just so you know, the TMF the DIA reference model is independent of whether you're using electronic or paper. So it is to get a common expectation of where certain things are going to be filed, and you have that so that you can look through it. And depending on time, we'll pull it open if we have time. But that's there for your information. Now, when you look at that DIA reference manual, Section 5 is site management. And so what we do for our electronic investigator site files is we pull out the Section 5. We also pull out some other sections around investigational product, and we pull out and we provide some general training materials. But the idea is that this TMF reference model allows you to organize those folders by site so that you can have a standard one, and basically each site has their own electronic investigator site file that they are able to see. And then at the end, you can archive that, or you can roll up all but the source information into your TMF. So there's a couple different ways to do that, but that's the main structure is through Section 5. And as I said, we also then put investigational product in there and a couple of other things. But the idea is this allows you to be able to have that for each site. And we also set up our numbering so that it rolls up by site, so that each site's numbering is specific to their individual site for each of the folders. And then that's the main thing. And as I said, we use essential document checklist for each site. Now, with the eTMF, all documents are maintained in the electronic format. You can use a naming convention just like you would with paper, but to align with your submissions. Most follow the DIA reference model in some format. Almost everybody makes some tweaks to it, but in general, it follows the DIA reference model. And so in contrast to the investigator site file, the eTMF isn't accessible to the site. So when you're looking for electronic systems, if you're going to get a system, you want one that will allow you to set up both a site EISF and the eTMF for the sponsor. So if you can only do the eTMF, you're losing a huge value of the EISF. So I think that's a really important piece to pay attention to. It only includes documents that are present, not placeholders for documents that are expected. In most situations, some systems do allow you to identify what should be expected or not. But in general, you get only what's in there. It allows you to have audit readiness, which is an important expectation. And this should be only your final documents should be stored. So now when you see, I'm going to do this going forward. When you see 5 stars, this is like really important and things that I think are really going to help you moving forward. So this is around the tech requirements for EISF. One is that the sites have to be able to access and control their EISF. Does that mean it has to sit on their server? No. It just means that it can't be that they are just sending documents to you, and you are quote unquote maintaining their electronic investigator site file. No, they have to have full access to that file. You can set it up so that they can't delete documents. That's okay. But this is an important requirement. You need to have robust role-based access. So as we talked about earlier, one of the things is that you can you can upload informed consent. You can put other source data like local labs in here, like discharge summaries or other information from SAEs, but you want to make sure that your role-based access protects it so that only the monitor and the site and the auditor can see any data that has PHI. There are certain systems that allow you to do redaction of the subject's name, but you can do this without that just by using your role-based access. And you do need to remember that you need to have a separate sponsor in site archives, because your site data, your site documents will include source documents, including the informed consents. And so you do not want that given to the sponsor, but each site then has their reg binder on a disk or whatever, and then that way you can be sure that every single informed consent is reviewed, every single one is there, all of the documents that you need to make sure. Then you can, when you close that out, instead of saying this is what you have, you can make sure that they have all the documents they should. And another key feature is that the eSignature should be available for multiple users. So, and that's because you're going to need that for generating a certified electronic copy. So this is a 5-star. Remember this stuff. Take a screenshot and remember this when you're looking at systems. Now let's talk a little bit about the workflow. As I mentioned, we keep a site-specific EISF essential document list because depending on the site, you may have different documents. They're not all the same. For instance, if it's a local IRB, you may have different notification. You may have if they have an SAE or specific deviations, those may be notifications that are only at one site and not at all sites. So you want to make sure to keep this essential document list for each site. I mean, that's what we do. We think it's very important and valuable. Some eTMF documents should be available and archived in the EISF. So, you know, your protocol, your investigational brochure, any training materials that you have, both the training materials and any documentation of training needs to go into there. And as I mentioned before, any IP management, because you want to know that you have all of your shipping receipts and all of the other documents that you need around any of your investigational product or other study specific documentation or site-specific documentation you need. So basically what we do is we make these available and then we archive them when we archive the investigator site file. And we add a note to file. Again, you don't have to. You could put it in your monitoring plan as well, but which documents in the eTMF were available to the sites, so that you are making clear that that site has all of the materials they need to be able to manage the study, and you can do it all with electronic. And the nice thing about the EISF is that it allows you to access it wherever you are. You don't have to go to wherever those notebooks are and to be able to access any of the documents for that site. Now, here's my other 5-star for today's, and that is, what is a certified copy? And this is in 21 CFR. It's also in the EMA reflection paper and the FDA paper. It's a copy of an original information that has been verified as indicated by dated signature as an exact copy, having all the same attributes and information as the original. So you take a paper document and then you make a certified copy, a certified electronic copy, and now you can use that certified electronic copy to do whatever you would originally plan to do in paper. So this allows you to do this for your informed consent, as I mentioned, for local labs. Any of these can be uploaded into the individual subjects folders, and then you can use that to do your review. So we use this certified copy any place that we're using, any place there's a wet signature. So we don't use it just for informed consent, but any place where there's a wet signature, we make a certified electronic copy. Now, how do you use it? So we like them for remote review of documents, to allow us to review documents in near real time, not to have to go out to the site to do it. To put them into our eTMF and EISF so that it assures the sponsor and research sites that all of their documents are there. You have everything there, and it's all in electronic format. And one of the key findings from FDA audits is that documents supporting trial conduct are missing. So for, again, trying to focus on where there have been weaknesses in the system, this is an important area for you to consider. So how do we use them for informed consent review? So first of all, the site and the subject complete the informed consent process in paper, okay? Then the site scans that document and certifies it as an electronic version, or certifies that the electronic version is the same as the paper, okay? And that can be all done in the EISF. And then the monitor can review that certified copy of the ICF and files and subject, and then the monitor files it in the subject's EISF source folder. So it allows you to very quickly review informed consents, make sure that they're correct, make sure that you have every one of them, and you can do it all remotely. So it's not something that you have to do at the site, and then you can do it much faster. And we did a large study, and it allowed us to do all of the informed consent review with a median of 5 days, and it allowed us to do an audit within 2 days of 10% of all of the informed consents across all of the sites, because we could do it all remotely. So it was a really, really good tool for us. So when do you use it? Informed consents, source documents from an SAE, or if you're in the device area, UADE, which is an unanticipated adverse device event. If you've got local labs, a research site uploads laboratory reports signed off by the investigator. So the other thing is, if you're getting paper forms and they have to sign off that they reviewed them, that's another good place. Again, any place you have a wet signature, that's the place to think about using a certified electronic copy. And then that means you can review those remotely. Again, by putting them in an electronic system, it allows you to have that audit trail value, so you know when they're in there, and it does allow you to make sure that you know, as opposed to just scanning them and sending them to a monitor. By putting them in an electronic investigator site file, then you're maintaining that confidentiality, you're maintaining that access, and you're not having those available other ways. I'm seeing that there's one question. So I scan ICF signature pages all the time and have never had to certify the scan. That's true. So people do it without doing the certified copy, but if you read the regulations, you can't confirm that that is the same as a paper copy. So this is, when we reviewed the 21 CFR Part 11 and their recommendation about certifying a copy, that is something that's different than what people have done. Sites have been scanning and sending informed consents to monitors for a long time. But remember, the problem with that is you don't have any way to record that you've reviewed them. You've reviewed them and you say you reviewed them. You don't have a way that you're protecting where they are, so you're really not protecting personal health information. And finally, you don't have that audit trail to show that it's all been done. So, and you can't be sure that they're necessarily all going to be in the in the site's reg binder. So you're absolutely right, but there are real values to making a certified electronic copy. So in summary, and we're right on time, technology, the monitor, and RBM. So technology plays a critical role in RBM. It can help you do so much more remotely, and again, focus on your high-risk areas. E-signatures and certified copies can be used for remote review, and again, I recommend that they go into an electronic investigator site file in most situations for documents so that you have the audit trail, that you have complete documentation, and then you have record that you reviewed it. The audit trail can identify who entered data or uploaded documents, when, and who reviewed it. Role-based access is really important for protecting personal health information. It also can be a very useful tool for you to how to use systems. So we use this role-based access to do many really cool, unique things. And so this is an important thing for you to understand. And that's why things like, checking training, making sure the right people do the right thing, that's a really important piece. Edit checks are important for you to know what the system is actually checking and what it isn't. Because if you're assuming that, you may be wrong and you may be missing things because you're assuming the system can do it. And so you really have to understand what the system's doing, what edits have actually been programmed in. So there's a million edits that can be programmed in, which are the ones that were used. And finally, the EISF can provide a significant opportunity for remote review of documents, including the informed consent, while maintaining documentation, assuring that you have all the documents that you need and you have the audit trail. So thank you, everybody. I'll just check to see if there's any last questions because we're about to go off. Again, if you can subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on Google+. We will keep you updated on all the new things, like when all of these webinars are posted, if we have new white papers, if we have any other new information. Our commitment is to helping the industry to adopt RBM, and we would very much like you to share the webinar links and where to get those, which is on MaunaRBM.com. All of the webinars are there, so please share with your friends if you like these. Let your friends know so that they can catch up with you and be involved, and we can start to build a large community of people that really understand what risk-based monitoring can do and how we can really improve the clinical trial process. So thanks very much, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.